Rampage, the Age of Ramps. Hello and welcome to another episode of Atomic Vinyl Reviews. Today, I'll be taking you guys through my thoughts and a little review of Rampage, the most recent sort of kaiju action movie that's come out lately. I must say we really are living in sort of a kaiju renaissance of sorts. We're getting a whole bunch of films recently, ever since Godzilla 2014. We've got that whole legendary monster verse, we've got Pacific Rim and all that, we've got Shin Godzilla, we've got the anime, the Godzilla Monster Planet anime thing going on, and now we have a Rampage. This is a video game movie, actually. It's based off a arcade game from, back in the 80s. A pretty simple game. I think when I was younger, I did play a version of it of some sort. Basically, from what I remember, a bunch of people drank some weird fizzy drink and turned into monsters, and you just jump around breaking buildings and eating people, which is pretty awesome. So, old style sort of 8-bitty type video game. And yeah, so my initial thoughts of the film is, before we get into some spoiler stuff, is this film was a lot better than I'd expected going in. It was better than it had any right to be. Obviously, this isn't some Oscar super fancy schmancy movie. It's not Shin Godzilla or 1954 or King Kong or anything like that. But as far as modern kaiju movies goes, this is one of the better ones, actually. I'd rate it around the same amount as, say, the first Pacific Rim or something like that. It was the action in it was really good, actually. I don't really have anything bad to say about this movie. It was just I had pretty low expectations going in, because it's by the same director as San Andreas, I think. With those kind of like I was expecting on the same level as all the sort of recent films with The Rock in it. But this one was out of those recent films, I'd say it's the best too. I'm not that big on disaster movies, so that one was a bit meh for me. It was still good though. And Jumanji recently was pretty cool. I didn't see it in cinemas, but I streamed it illegally just the other night before seeing this film, and that one was pretty enjoyable. Jack Black was awesome in that. And here we have The Rock in another film, and this is probably one of the better ones in recent years. So I'm not big on holding back on spoilers, so I'll just put out the spoiler warning here, I guess, because I don't know what I'm going to say next. But just to cap off just my initial thoughts is this film was better than expected. It was very fun, very entertaining, and the CGI and the action was done pretty well, and it wasn't boring at any points. So getting into some of the most spoilery stuff, so you got The Rock as like a zoologist or a primatologist or something, they called him. He was pretty good in this, actually. None of the characters were very in-depth, but none of them were distinctly dislikable, really. Maybe like that random general at the end who's all like negative was kind of, I don't know, he seemed a bit paper cutout, like, the military general who doesn't listen to anybody just because it's kind of like their character thing. And it's sort of a bunch of cardboardy cutout characters that just do weird things, especially the villains. They were pretty random, but what they do with with the way they kill them off later is actually pretty awesome. So I didn't really mind that. Actually, yeah, so you have the characters, and even I really like the creatures in this, because one of the issues, I think this movie was a lot better than Pacific Rim Uprising. I really enjoyed that film too, but on a second viewing it slowed out a bit, apart from some moments here and there. That film was also funny. this one was also funny too. And but this one had a bit better pacing and action, and the story was a lot simpler and a bit more focused. The story in this was you know, going off the limited material they had in the game, they did a pretty good job at making an entertaining, straightforward movie about that didn't really, wouldn't really disappoint anyone, even though it, you know, changed a lot from whatever basic story that first one had, which I completely didn't mind. I'm not like super attached to that one, and you know, for a video game movie, I'd say this is one of the better ones that's out there. You know, there might be like the Tomb Raider ones are pretty good, and there are probably like one or two other ones that might be alright, but that I'm forgetting. Anyway, I'm not the biggest video gamey person, but I've played my share of kaiju video games, and this one actually. Sorry, I'm jumping all over the place, but just one of those days. This one reminded me a lot of Destroy All Monsters. This is a game that I used to play on PlayStation 2. Fantastic game. I highly recommend it to all you kaiju fans. It's probably the best sort of 50s B-movie monster themed game out there. And if it were to be made into a movie, I would be so there. And this is really close to that. There were even some scenes like I'll go into this a bit more, but this movie had some cool, really action sort of gore scenes, which were just beautifully done. Actually, I'm glad to have seen not seen. I'm glad to have seen that done in a film these days, because I find with a lot of these kaiju movies, they're really afraid to have the kaijus rampaging, insert title screen here, through populated areas. A lot of the time they're like, okay, city's evacuated, now start scene. And it's like, well, I mean, in real life, that's all well and good, but in a movie, you kind of want to see the people getting crushed. I mean, sorry if I sound horrible, but that's really what you want to see in one of these movies. And the game had that, and so did this movie. There was some, you know, blood here and there, and some scenes, and like the also Destroy All Monsters. It does have like some elements from this. Like the character designs are pretty similar. I'll get into those a bit later, but. Like a scene that looked straight out of Destroy All Monsters was this really sort of scene that happens in the main fight scene where, again, spoiler, where George, being the big gorilla guy, he gets he falls backwards and gets stabbed straight through his chest with this big piece of a girder or something that's shaped like a spear, basically. And for those of you guys who have played Destroy All Monsters, you know that you can find these things lying around and throw them at your opponents, and they get speared through the heart, and then you gotta like pull it out, and then you can, you know, throw it back and all that sort of stuff. And that's like straight out of that game, which I found really cool because I really love that game. Um, this film had a lot of similar elements to a lot of recent movies, like I said, the San Andreas and that stuff, as well as, you know, Pacific Rim and all those recent kaiju films. It actually had a lot in common, I'd say, with the Peter Jackson's King Kong. Like the gorilla character seemed kind of similar to King Kong. Obviously, I mean, they had to change him up, not to, you know, copyright stuff, of course, and I think they did a good job. Like, it's in your mind, you're still like, okay, this is kind of King Kong, but it's like, I'm not complaining. I love King Kong, so this was really awesome. George was really awesome. The motion capture on him was done really good. He had a good sense of personality and humor. Unfortunately, I actually missed the first like 10 minutes of the film. Apparently, there was some cool scene with the space station crashing, which is something also that really relates to Destroy All Monsters. I know I keep going back to this, but it's like they did a Destroy All Monsters and Rampage sort of video game based movie, because in Destroy All Monsters the thing is that there are aliens in the sky, and like the humans zap them out of the sky, basically the UFOs, and they crash, and they're like ship's fuel basically from when they crash causes everything to mutate and turn into kaijus. And something similar happens in this movie. Like I said, I didn't see the first 10 minutes or so, so I only got to see the beginning from when they find George in the bear enclosure and like he's already grown big, and that's when they find the like capsule that fell out of this space station or something. So I don't really know what happened before then, apart from some of the contexts they give later in the film. But it's all pretty straightforward, I imagine. And I'd love to see the beginning in this film too. What else can I say? I really like, yeah, the monster designs. Again, going back to Destroy All Monsters, uh, there's a gorilla in that game which is basically the King Kong of that game, called Konga, and if you know that game, you know that every character has like four different looks or skin options. So you can give them different looks depending on how many you like unlock them throughout the game. And with Konga, you get like the normal brown King Kong type gorilla. You also get uh, a liquid metal looking gorilla with like blue eyes, which is pretty cool. You get a Mecha Kong, like a robot one, and you get one that's an albino sort of one with these blue glowing eyes, and that design really reminded me of George in this one. So I felt like something else from that game, and going back to the other creatures, I enjoyed them a lot. Like they didn't have a whole lot of personality or build up to them, but for what they did on screen, they were a lot more interesting than say in the recent Pacific Rim Uprising. Those kaijus kind of showed up out of nowhere and didn't really have much personality until they sort of merged and became that like final form. And then that one had a bit more, you know, screen time and got to have a bit more personality. But in this one, even though they don't really have a whole, you know, backstory to them, they just kind of show up. They still look cool and definitely entertaining. And with the limited sort of personality they do express, I definitely enjoyed that. Like the wolf had this really cool scene in the forests where it was fighting all these soldiers, and you know you got to show off some of its meanness, and there was a really funny scene later on. You know, there was some jokes in this that did land pretty well. Like in the end battle scene where they're fighting the wolf, and like they, you know, shoot it off, hit it or shoot it off into the distance, and then it like opens up its arms and it has like a sugar glider type wings, and it just like turns back, and then uh, Dwayne Johnson's character is just like, of course the wolf flies, and you know that joke was landed really well. Um, and I really liked the crocodile monster Lizzie in this. I think it was Lizzie in the game. I think the wolf was called Ralph, which they did bring up here. Actually, funny thing, the game Rampage actually exists in the world of this movie, which is pretty cool, because in the bad guys sort of office, they just have an arcade game randomly in the back, the Rampage. So I like that. That was kind of random, self-aware, but funny. And yeah, I really like the design of the crocodile creature. From the back, it looked very much like Anguirus. Like it had the spiky back, and it had like, you know, kind of like an Ankylosaurus sort of tail with like the spikes on the tip of its tail. But just if it was a little rounder and like, oh, it also had tusks, which kind of is a bit Anguirus. Because like, hold on, I got my X Plus here. But yeah, from the back, it you know, it had a similar back, and it had tusks, because you know, Anguirus, he has these little tusks here. Of course, the crocodile had them like coming out of its face, and it looked a little bit more like you know, it was definitely crocodile-y, but it looked more like there's this recent straight-to-TV kaiju film, this sort of samurai kaiju film that came out in Japan called Kojin. I actually have somebody shared a YouTube video of that whole film with me, but it, you know, it's all in Japanese, so the only subtitles are the ones that are sent from the actual YouTube subtitle option where it scans the video and then it estimates what the people are saying, and they're a bit dodgy. But I'm yet to watch that. But the monster in that reminded me a lot of this crocodile thing, and I really like the design. It has really gnarly sort of teeth, and it just a really cool reptilian look. And so I enjoyed all the monsters. The wolf probably the least out of all three. Like George had a really great personality, like a really solid sort of a Kong type monster, or son of Kong, because you know that one was an albino too. And the action was, I really liked what I really liked about the action was, you know, you really got to see the monsters just messing thing up. They didn't hold back on the gore, as I said before. And I love the physics of this, and just like how they don't really there's a lot of insane stuff that happens, but it's not one of those films where like insane stuff doesn't happen, if that makes sense. So I love their interactions with the buildings. They kind of like jump in and out of buildings, smashing them along the way. And what's also really cool is that unlike a lot of these kaiju films where they just keep making the monsters bigger and bigger because cities are huge now, they kind of keep them small so you can get more of the detail of what they're doing, more, and they can interact with the people. I also like the way they varied the size of these kaijus, these creatures, because like Lizzie was huge, and the wolf was big, but it was sort of thin and agile. And the George was sort of you know, like a normal sort of King Kong size, maybe a bit bigger, so he could interact with the people a little more, and it didn't seem insane. And yeah, so I really enjoyed that. Like also the way they moved was really fun because it was pretty action packed, fast, and there was a lot of, you know, no kaiju stuff, but for the most part, like none of that was boring. The characters were at the very least somewhat entertaining. Like I kind of feel about this film in the same way I do about Alien vs Predator. A lot of people don't like that film, but for me, it was one of my, you know, favorite films growing up. So I have like a guilty pleasure for that film, and it's by no means the worst Alien film, because they made a sequel to that one, and we do not speak of that film. I just pretend it doesn't exist. So I don't know. I like Alien vs Predator, the first one, and this one felt probably even more sort of action-packed for the most of it, and enjoyable. So if you like genre films, if you like kaiju films, I don't recommend skipping this one. This one was, yeah, just better than it should have been. And I probably just rambled on for a while now, but yeah, so thanks guys for watching. Let me know what you thought of the film, and what films are you looking forward to coming up in the future, and all that. And yeah, just keep keep collecting and keep being awesome, people. May all your kaiju be irradiated kaiju. I used to say vinyl there, but this isn't really a figure video, so anyway, bye.